Welcome back to Off the Rak, conversations on transformative leadership with yours truly, Walt Rakowich. It's an honor to introduce today's guest. Herman Bulls is the International Director and Vice Chairman at JLL, a global financial and professional services firm specializing in real estate operations and investment management. Herman serves on several boards, most notably the U.S. Department of Defense and USAA, a Fortune 100 financial services firm serving military members and their families, but not Rob Gronkowski, although I think Rob wishes that they would. He's a National Association of Corporate Directors Fellow, and he is recognized as one of the most influential individuals in corporate America and among the top 100 corporate governance professionals in the nation. Herman earned his engineering degree at West Point and his MBA from Harvard Business School. Before his current post at JLL, he completed nearly 12 years of active duty with the U.S. Army, and among his last assignments were the Pentagon and West Point. He retired as a colonel in 2008. Herman's life experience converges on delivering value, creating impact, and building trust. And he likes to say, it's not about you, it's about the team. Today, we're going to talk about Herman's formative years and how he recreated some of those early learning moments for his sons. We're also going to really learn about his pivot from really a heartbreaking disappointment to pursuing an even greater path of impact. And we'll unpack more recent areas where he's being influential and what best practices he likes to share with inspiring leaders. So join me for an in-depth exploration of what positive influence looks like from the field to the front lines with Herman Bulls. I'm really honored today to have Herman Bulls joining me today on Off the Rak. He's the International Director and Vice Chairman of JLL. Herman's life experiences converge on delivering value, creating impact, and building trust. Herman likes to say it's not about you, it's about the team. Herman, welcome today. Great to have you on.
Great to be here. And I might add, it's also a pleasure to serve with you on the board of directors that host hotels. And I've learned so much from you. And I've told you this, I just like to say it publicly. Your demeanor, your experience, you don't get excited. And those are many of your qualities that I emulate.
Well, you're so nice to say that, Herman. I appreciate it. And by the way, feelings are mutual, and I'm sure we'll get into a few things in the interview, which will cross our paths here. But I really want to start off with a tough question. All right, are you ready for it, Herman?
I'll do my best.
I know you're on the board of USAA, and I think in one of our prior board meetings, I recall you telling me that you met Rob Gronkowski at the Army-Navy football game. So is that correct? Am I right in saying that?
Not only did I meet him at the Army-Navy football game, I also met him this past year at the Super Bowl, where USAA is a major sponsor. So I've run into Gronk 2 times. My kids had the opportunity to meet him. My grandkids, they've seen him on TV. And I got to tell you, he is the jokester that you see in those commercials is just the way he is in real life, and a pleasant, jovial, joking individual. And let me tell you something else about him. Well, he's a big man.
Oh, I know he's a big man. Right. Well, being a Steeler fan, I hate to say, but I was never a big Pats fan, but I have to tell you that I love him on those commercials. He is absolutely the best. Couldn't be a better sponsor, or couldn't be a better spokesman, I should say, for you all. He's terrific.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you have the recall, and now that we've added Sam Elliott to the story. Yeah. And the whole idea is Gronk's favorable rating, his recognition was very high. And obviously, as you know, this stuff doesn't happen by accident. There are a lot of analytics that go into it. And some people say, why do you do it? However, the recall rate and the awareness has gone up tremendously using Gronk.
Oh yeah, no, he's tremendous. It's probably been good for him too, I would think. What an organization to be involved with. Um, so Herman, I want to go back to, I want to start off a little bit about your life and kind of where you started from. And I think it really, as I've gotten to know you better, I think it's really impactful on how how you grew up and just the way that you think about things in life. You've talked about how small your birthplace was. I think you said on an interview that it was a suburb of a suburb of a suburb. I'd like
Sure
to
was.
hear, I'd like to hear a little bit about your childhood in Alabama and kind of how that shaped who you are today.
Walt, you are right about the suburbs. So I was born in Florence because that's where the hospital is. However, Killen is the suburb that some people know. And then Center Star is the suburb of Killen. And this is the place where, I tell you a little about my family. My dad, thinking about growing up, I'm the youngest of seven. And Walt, I think something that has, I hope, made me a great father and even a greater grandfather, since you and I are both grandparents,
Hmm.
is the fact I never met my dad, Walt. And
Hmm.
it was one of these things where he was a laborer, a janitor at TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority. And I think some of my entrepreneurial zeal I got from him. So in addition to him having his hours working as a janitor, he came home and he and his brother, they bought land. And as you know, in the South, many African Americans have lost those farms. And I'm happy to say our farm is about 200 acres, is still in our family. So on this
Wow.
particular day in October 17th, 1955, because I was born February 4th, 1956, he came home from work and he got on the tractor and he was going, our farms were not contiguous. So he was going from one farm to the
Hmm.
other and he had to go out on Highway 72, which is a 4-lane highway. And unfortunately, when he got out to the highway, an 18-wheeler truck ran into him
Oh
and
my
he
God.
was killed. So I lost my wife as well. And as you know, Walt, 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and I was really feeling sorry for myself a couple of mornings after I lost her. And then a thought came to my mind. My mother, at the time that my dad was killed in that accident, was in another part of the county picking cotton, okay, to be paid, to help support the family. And she was obviously pregnant with me at the time. At the
Mhm.
time, my mom had obviously 6 kids, with the oldest one would have been about 14. No education. She had not graduated from high school. And the community came together and they said, "Hey, Lucibel, we'll take one, et cetera, et cetera." And my mother, that I just think so much of her, she said, "No, I'm keeping my family." And what she did, Walt, she worked 3 jobs. Okay. She was a cook at Lakeview Restaurant there in Shills Creek in Alabama. She was a domestic, meaning she cleaned houses. And I can remember going to some of those houses and seeing the kids' toys and just dreaming. It was like a fairyland. And I can tell you, I live in a very nice place now and having the opportunity to experience that. But I just can remember those images as a young kid saying, "Oh my gosh, look at their toys. They're so neat, et cetera, et cetera." And she also collected insurance for Atlanta Life Insurance Company, which African American owned insurance company. So she was an
Amazing.
entrepreneur and did that. And then when I got into the third grade, she went back and got her GED. And I remember that distinctly because she would go downtown into Florence from Sinistar 2 nights a week. And some nights she would take me with her. I was the youngest. And the janitor would open the gym. And while they were taking classes, I would just be able to go in the gym and shoot hoops or whatever. And that was really fun. So she finished that. And then she went to John C. Calhoun Community College and became a licensed practical nurse. And with that, well, our family was able to go from, and again, I didn't ever think of us as poor. When you're poor, you never know you're poor, right? Because that's all you know. And of
Right.
course, we didn't have 1,500 cable channels to see the Kardashians, to see what
Right.
the extremes could have
Life
been.
was a little different back then.
Life was a little different back then.
Yeah.
And with that, she we moved from Sinistar. We moved into Florence, Alabama, which is the city where the University of North Alabama is now. And I was seventh grade. I'll never forget. I went in the second 6 weeks of the seventh grade, and I started school there. And I'm such a big supporter of sports. And I think it's not only important for boys, but it's important for girls. And the basketball coach, Walter Rainey, had already had his tryouts for basketball. So he sees this tall, lanky kid come in, quasi tall, and he says, okay, I'll give you a tryout. And luckily, he added me to the team. And as you know, particularly as a teenager, the sports and those activities are the things that get you to know people, get you to try to experience leadership. And from there, I made the basketball team. I was a pretty good student. But I want to tell you one thing about my junior high school. I made A's and B's, mostly A's, but I got a D in a grade called deportment. And back in the old days, deportment was how you carried yourself. And the D that I got, even though I was a class favorite, was because I talked too much.
No way.
I got a D in deportment. I've got to find those cards somewhere. And that was kind of the start of it, Walt. And again, this is a time that I grew up. I think it's important to appreciate in the South. This is in the 60s, mid to late 60s, that this is going on. And Walt, things that even are impressed upon me today, there are 4 life experiences sort of that I had that I think about every day that my kids, I tell them about it, but they don't really appreciate it. Number one, the KKK. When we would drive from Sinistar into Florence, you know how you have the firemen out with their boots, taking donations? The KKK would be out in their hoods and their regalia taking donations. They wouldn't bother you, but I mean, I'm 6, 7 years old. You see this, and it's imprinted on my mind. So that's one. The second is as you would go to a public place and you would have the water fountains and bathrooms that said whites only, Negroes. So you couldn't drink out of the water fountain. You couldn't go into the bathroom and those types of things. I actually remember that. The third thing is going to the movie theater. And you'll notice in the South, most movie theaters were built with a side door that went upstairs. And that's where blacks had to go to watch the movie. You couldn't go and down. You could come down and buy something. They take your money, but you had to go back upstairs. And at times we would throw popcorn on all the people down below us, but you had to go watch the movie. And then the last one, which I think about probably even more so than the other 3, is obviously we didn't go out to eat that often. But when you went out to eat, I can remember a place we used to go to eat. You had to go to the back door to get your food because you could not go inside to sit down and eat. And, even though you paid the same thing everybody else paid, but you just, society and norms did not arrange for that. So those are some of the issues, Walt, and you have heard me talk about diversity, which I talk about in a practical business sense. But those are some of the underlying experiences that I have that gives me, I think, a feeling for how people might be reacting to, prejudice and bias.
Yeah. And Herman, it's very easy for someone like me who grew up in the North to hear about those things, but to experience them are 2 different things. That's just 2 different things. They're etched in your mind. And I'm sure have been amazingly impactful, both negatively and now positively, hopefully in the future.
Well, very, very much so, because here I am. And I think another thing that's important that sort of shaped me, and I think I inherited it from my mom and dad, is there are no boundaries. There's certainly rails, but rails can be gotten over. I told you I was a pretty good student. So I go freshman year, and in the South, Friday night lights and football is what it's all about. Yeah. And for whatever reason, I remember when I played Pee Wee football, I wanted to play quarterback. And the guy, I was one of probably 2 or 3 black kids on the team. The guy said, "No, you're not playing quarterback. You're playing guard. Get down here." So I played guard, Pee Wee. That was 8th grade. And then 9th grade, I said, when it came time to go out for the 9th grade team at Coffee High School, I said, I want to play quarterback. We had a guy named Joe Hollis, He graduated from Coffee in 1965. In 1964, they were state champions. He went to Auburn on both a football and baseball scholarship, and he was the freshman coach. And I was somewhat shocked. I was selected as the starting quarterback on the freshman team. And you got to remember, this is a school where desegregation had occurred, and the school was 16% Black. Okay, and the rest, not many Hispanics at that time, Black,
Yeah.
and other might have been 1%, and then the rest were Caucasian. And that went on to my senior year or junior year. I lettered 3 years varsity, so sophomore year I played defensive back. And my senior year, I was the first full-time starting Black quarterback. I was president of student council. I was boys state. I had my own radio show, which when we talk about West Point, one of the things they used to recruit me to go to West Point. And it was just this world that was great for the most part. And something that I can talk about more now, Walt. The white kids, like me, I did the things I need to do. Some of the Black kids like me, but there were a group of the Black kids that would call me an Oreo. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's very, not a positive term, which means that you're Black on the outside, but you're white on the inside because you're doing all the things that the white people do.
Right.
So, I mean, you're 15, 16, 17. These are things where you have to just look in the mirror and say, who am I? What am I going to be? How am I going to handle this? And having that opportunity to be both a leader on the football team. And by the way, I also lettered in track. I had the high jump record, 6'3" and 3/4. I can't even look that high now. And I also lettered in basketball. And the biggest thing in my high school career was one day I actually played in a baseball game and high jumped at the same time.
Oh my!
Did it?
Oh my!
So not quite Deion Sanders of the way he did it, but that was it. So that entire experience, but starting with my family and my parents, and we talked about the siblings, 6 other siblings. 6 of us graduated from college. All of us went to college, but 6 graduated with a total of 11 degrees. And I attribute that, to my mom, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Herman, it's interesting in my own life, my mother was the one who pushed me to be the best person I could be. And she was really the motivator in our family. And all I got to say is thank God for mothers. Yours was amazingly impactful. Oh my goodness. Well, listen, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. Obviously you went to West Point. By the way, this past week, Army broke into the top 25 rankings in college football. And which congratulations.
Thank you. And let's not forget our buddies down in Annapolis. So did Navy.
So did Navy. I know we're going to give both credit where credit's due. I know how much you love Army. And in fact, you played in the Army football team. I'd like you to talk a little bit about how that happened. But I also want you to talk about what you call one of your biggest disappointments in life. And I'll let you tell the story about the Army-Navy game. But I'm really interested for the audience in kind of how you rebounded from that news from your coach. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about all of that.
Sure. So I was recruited by all of the academies, and I had another opportunity talking about a great team. Vanderbilt also recruited me, and they were putting something together as a partial scholarship. And Walt, it's important to know that my senior year was the first year that the NCAA changed the rules. You used to be, if you graduated in 1973 and you signed a scholarship, you got a 4-year grant in aid. Okay. And what was happening is the cost of that, if people stopped playing, as long as you tried, they had to pay. So they said, okay, we're going to make them 1 year. So you basically get a 1-year scholarship that's renewable depending on you being on the team. So a combination of that, and not that I doubted myself, but I was not, weights weren't a big thing. Weights that come out, I'm paying for sports. I'm doing it all on just the limited natural talent I have. And most importantly, my heart. And, I was competitive. so West Point recruited me. So freshman year, I did play on our freshman team, quarterback. We had a guy named Lehman Hall. When I was a freshman, he was trading out starting on varsity. So when spring training came along, they said, "Okay, Herman, we're going to move you to defensive back. You'll have a better chance of actually doing something." Now,
Mm-hmm.
Walt, uh, my ego tells me that they were still thinking I had some talent and potential. But in reality, what I think it was with the defensive backs, and what do you need on a defensive back? You need somebody to throw passes
You're
during the
right.
drills. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I did that. And again, I rotated in. So the good news is sophomore year, I'm third string varsity. The bad news is there's a freshman starting in front of me.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, and I tell you what, I'm one of these guys, I'm like a dog on a bone. I had not gone home after school, since my 8th grade year. Because between student council, sports, and everything.
Yeah.
So it was no big deal for me at West Point, where it's really difficult. Our kids have to take the same courses when they play football. So what happened is at so sophomore year went by, and at the end of spring's training sophomore year, Homer Smith was our coach, bless his heart, great soul. I have a lot of respect for him. He called me in and he said, "Herman, you're never going to start an Army Navy game." Okay, so that is a signal that you only come here to play an Army Navy game. So if you're not going to do that, why are you here? So he actually called my mother as well. Called my mother and sent her a letter. He sent her a note, sent her a letter. Talked about what a great young man I was and blah blah. However, and it was it was one of the most disappointing days in my life, because I had always been part of a team, and I just wanted to run out on that field. I was on the scout team and really helping the team get ready. And you sat there, and in one sense, it was one of the worst things that happened to me. In another sense, probably one of the best things that happened to me.
Yep.
Because I looked at it as a failure personally. I was questioning myself. Am I who I think I am? And then after that, I had done very well at West Point in terms of the leadership characteristics. And at that time, they were picking students to go to Ranger School. Mm-hmm. And my tactical officer, as a result of my peer ratings from other people, how I did in athletics and physical training, they wanted to make sure the people they sent to Ranger School were going to be very successful. So my tactical officer said, "Bulls, you're going to Ranger School." And so I was, what do they call it? Nominated. I guess what is that word they use when you volunteer? I was voluntold.
Voluntold. Yeah.
Voluntold that I was going to Ranger School, and probably one of the most important experiences of my life.
And Herman, talk about that Ranger School, because I don't know that a lot of people in the audience understand. Basically, it's like the Navy's version of SEALs, right?
It is exactly that. It is a 6-week course in small unit tactics.
Yeah.
And the Rangers generally operate behind enemy lines. So you're inserted could be by land, sea, or air. And you are taught to do things with your hand, and you're taught to live off the land. And in this particular training, which is generally speaking, probably 40% of the people graduate and finish the course. I mean, it's that demanding, because the whole idea and what I learned from it is that your limitations are really further than you think they are. And until you've been there to see that you can do it, because what are the things that makes it so demanding? Number one, the exertion. You start with a very intense physical program. You got to be in shape when you get there. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you do that. Then you have the patrols, and the patrols, you get maybe one ration a day. You are in a camp during the day. All the movement is at night. You don't get a lot of sleep. You're not getting food. You actually can hallucinate, because your body, when it's not getting the nutrients that it needs to include sleep and food, your body acts strange. Mm-hmm. And you understand what that, and at the same time, it's just physically demanding. So mentally demanding, physically demanding, little nutrition, and you got to keep going. and they want to test you to the ultimate. And I was very fortunate to be chosen for a leadership position in the school. And I found out later that what they want to do is get somebody strong who can be a role model for the rest of the class. And I'll never forget General Vines. He retired as a 4-star general. We were in the mountain phase. There are 3 phases. Fort Moore used to be called Fort Benning, Georgia, where you get the basics of land navigation and the conditioning. Then you go to Dahlonega, Georgia, and you do the mountain phase. And then you go to down in Florida where you do swamp phase. And they in and out, they put a desert phase into it. But I did those 3 phases. And we were up in Dahlonega, and somebody said, Bulls, Captain Vines wants to see you. And I went in to see him, and he said, Bulls, you're not a company commander. Get out of here and go get those troops. So you eat last. Wow. I remember the night rappel. It's you got a little sunlight, but you're going down a 300-foot mountain at night, rappelling, and those types of things. The commander leads the way. So I was the first person off the mountain. And these are things that you know, if you're not accustomed to doing, it gives you the confidence. So you want to have confidence to do things as a good, and this is even in business, right? You want to have confidence, but you don't want to be so oblivious that you're arrogant, because when you're arrogant is when you make mistakes.
Yeah, and you know what? We all need tough situations in our lives. I've heard you say, whenever you have a bad day, you tell yourself, "I could be in Ranger School," and that kind of quickly puts things into perspective, right?
Just sleeping, and you're not wet, and you know sweat's not coming down your face, and it's just I to this day I say you don't know how good I feel right now just sitting here talking to you about it.
Right. What a humbling experience, right? But you know what? You took the experience that you had on the football team, which was unfortunately disappointing, but you turned it into something that was terrific and probably had a more lasting impact on your life. That's I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but
no. Let me tell you what I see that as. I saw people with much more natural ability and talent than I had. Mm-hmm. And perhaps when you have that, you don't try as hard, right? And I was just, a nanosecond or many nanoseconds slower and not as strong, et cetera, et cetera. But in the heart, I tried harder. And I think I transitioned that over into my life. Because let me tell you, playing college football is hard. Playing college football at a military academy is super hard. Okay. Because you get up in the morning, you go, if you ever watch the games on TV, they'll put the schedule up. And when I stopped playing football, I was probably in about, the lower 3/4 of the class, to be honest with you, because it's just tough. You still got to come back. You take the same exams that everybody else takes. And when I stopped playing football, my last 2 years, I made practically all A's and B's, raised my GPA up, and was able to follow your footsteps to go to Harvard Business School. And I wrote about that in my application. I said, this is why my grades improved, because I was playing football, doing this and blah, 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 and I can handle your program.
Yeah. And and I know at HBS, they look for a lot of the intangible things as to whether or not you can make it. It's not just all about intelligence, but it is about fortitude and those sorts of things. Herman, I've always known you as a pretty intentional person. I think you're intentional about pretty much everything you go about, which I admire so much in you. And I know you and your wife were really intentional about how you passed on that work ethic that you talked about and passion for knowledge and the like to your sons. And there's a lot of women and men that watch this program that have kids at home. And could you talk, not to switch gears, but I'm really interested in kind of what you did to be intentional with your sons as to how you think about life. I've heard about their visits to Alabama. Maybe you can bring that into it as well. But I'm interested in how you fathered your sons.
Well, first of all, you mentioned my wife Iris, and I think we ought to have a tribute to her. And I think just talking about that now, well, I don't even know if I've told you this, but we're doing a couple of things for her. We endowed at West Point, the diversity conference at West Point is the Iris and Herman Bulls and Family Conference. It'll be known as that forever. And this Veterans Day, we actually endowed the entrance to the military hall at the African American Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian Institute, and that's going to be dedicated to Iris from our family this year. And for your listeners to know who Iris is, she was ROTC. She and I met at my first assignment at Fort Dix, New Jersey. She ended up, I mean, at a time she was in the Army when it was waves. You know, the Army, the men and women were actually separate. However, she was XO for a basic training company at Fort Dix. We got married, went to Korea. She did such a great job that we both, when I was in grad school at Harvard, she was at Tufts University going to grad school. When I went to West Point to teach finance and economics, she went and she was in the admissions office there. Then we moved to Washington, and she just continued to have a great career. She worked on the Bushquell Inaugural Committee as a military member. Then she got out of the Army and worked in government. She stayed in government. Ending up, the pinnacle was she was a presidential appointee in the Clinton administration, and she was the number 2 person for personnel for the entire Army. And then after that, she stayed in and she helped set up the Defense Language Office, which was just phenomenal. She had the combination of the political skills, understanding Washington, understanding all the services, and her office was responsible for all language and culture policy for the Department of Defense. And Walt, this is not something that happens all the time. As I said, she passed away a little over 3 years ago. The Department of Defense actually set up a fellowship that they named after her. And every year they pick 5 to 6 ROTC cadets who are language focused. And they basically come to Washington, D.C. I open it up. We've done it twice. We'll do it every year. And we're going to create this cadre of ROTC cadets who are really interested in language, and it's called the Iris Burton Bulls Fellowship, and just phenomenal. So you start with that as your partner, and then we had, I'm going to tell you, well, when we met and we started to see that we were going to be with each other, we had 3 goals, okay? And those goals were to have our kids, buy a house, our kids in their education, okay, own a home, and have a reasonable retirement. And she and I agreed on those things before we were married. And as you know, we're not all born, you know, with the resources that you and I have now. And it's a process to build that. And we built that together, and there's no doubt. And with the kids, one of her rules was that the kids would be read to every night. Her major in undergrad was special education. And she said, your kids, I said, Iris, come on tonight. She said, no, if you don't do it, I'll go do it. I mean, she was just adamant about that. And one of the things with that, by the time our kids were, 6, 7, 8, we had gained some financial success. However, we thought it was very important that these kids got to know a little about their roots and their heritage. So they would go to Alabama every summer to stay with my mom at the time, who was still living. And they would be able to go and chase fireflies. And if you don't know anything about the South, you go visit somebody where the car is in the front yard and it's on cinder blocks, okay? You go into the living room and there's a picture of Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Jesus, and there's plastic on the couch. I mean, these are things that many of your listeners from the South will identify with. Yeah. And for that, they were able to meet their cousins, and they saw that everything wasn't this perfectly manicured environment with a pool next door to it. And I think that helped them. And to talk about each of them, Herman Jr., my oldest son, he went to West Point as well. Walt, he did 3 combat tours, 1 in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, 2 company commands while he's doing that. Phenomenal kid, leading soldiers, also went to Duke for his MBA, had another assignment at West Point, similar to what his mom had as an admissions officer. And he is currently in Chicago at the Army Enterprise Marketing Office. So they wanted young kids that had great analytical skills who had been downrange and knew how is it, because the Army's having a really tough problem, recruiting now. So
Yeah.
people like Herman Jr. are doing that. And his most important accomplishment is being the father of 3 of my grandkids, however. So he and his wife Jen, who's a school teacher, they've done great with their kids. And Walt, you know this yourself. It's so great to see your kids become parents
Mm.
and they mature. Okay, so
Yeah.
he has Connor, who is just a fantastic kid. They're all fantastic. Connor's 11, Quinn's 10. They're 18 months apart, and Kennedy is 7, and she is our first granddaughter. And another interesting fact, and your team would find this out. Kennedy was born on Iris's birthday, so they share the same birthday.
Oh
So
my.
special one.
That isn't that great?
And my middle son, Nathaniel, by the way, all 3 of my kids played college sports too. They were better athletes than I was. Nathaniel went to Earlham College, where he played football and ran track. And he has been in sales. He's now working with waste management and sales down in the Florida, North Palm Beach area. And then Jonathan, the youngest son, probably from sports, Herman played lacrosse at West Point for a couple of years. Jonathan actually played football at West Point for all 4 years. Wow. And from his sophomore year out, we went to every game. He wasn't playing much the sophomore year, but his junior and senior year, he was a contributor. They won a bowl game out in Texas, and it was just really, really fun for him. So he went into the Army as well, stayed 6 years. He was medically retired. He had a knee issue, but it wasn't from football. Okay, but he retired. He went to Duke for his MBA, and he's off to a fantastic start with Microsoft in sales. Matter of fact, 3 years ago, he was one of the top salesmen around the world, and he won a trip to the Super Bowl.
Oh, nice.
To show you how lucky our kids are, Jonathan's there at the Super Bowl, and Microsoft had a deal that they had Larry Fitzgerald come around, and Larry's up on stage, and they said, "Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?" You can imagine his colleagues are going, "How the hell you know Larry Fitzgerald?"
Right.
So he's there, and his wife, Brittany, they were just here this weekend. She's a nurse practitioner, and he is the father of our 4th grandchild, Justin, who is 7 months old. So just a fantastic group of kids. You see, they went to great schools. We taught them budgeting. We taught them humility. We taught them hard work. And I'm going to tell you, I hope they don't listen to this, but I'm proud of them.
There's probably nothing greater than the experiences that we give to our children. So I would just say, Herman, your boys are lucky to have had you and Iris as parents. You really, really, and it's great. I just think it's great to hear the intentionality of what you've done to raise them. So my hat's off to you. And you've provided a lesson for everybody listening in today.
Well, I want to make sure you said a lot of young people listen to these programs. And as you know, Walt, I'm very authentic in what I say. Okay.
Oh, I know you are. Yeah.
And some of us like sausage, because it tastes so good. But have you ever seen it being made?
Right. Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. So, anybody raising a family, you're going to have situations. Obviously, they never got into any major situations. However, what has been rewarding for me is to see, and what you have to do as a parent is you have to hold your position, right? Because as a parent, obviously, you're not running a popularity contest. And when my kids come back to me now and say, I really, really, really didn't like that then, but I really, really, really appreciate it now.
Appreciated it. Yeah.
And then you see them exhibit those same behavior toward their kids, because that's what it takes. And you know what I tell them? You ask them, I said, we are not going to be a one-hit wonder family, right? We're going to make this sustainable. In order to do that, you've got to do your part. We've got to have standards, and we're going to uphold ourselves to those standards.
Yeah, well, you've done that. Herman, I want to kind of start, have you give a little bit of advice. I mean, you're vice chairman of JLL. I mean, everybody does business in real estate with JLL. Obviously, my firm, Prologis, did. The organizations that we sit on the board of, host and the like. They're one of the largest real estate firms in the world. And so, and also I know you serve on some amazing boards. So you interact with a lot of people. I heard in one of the interviews that you had recently, you shared 6 skills that you think young leaders should focus on developing. And, I'd like if you could go through all 6 of them, you could go through 1 or 2 of them, up to you. But just think about, the advice that you'd give somebody younger today from a leadership perspective. I'm kind of interested in hearing about those 6 interpersonal skills.
Yeah, that's great. I had breakfast this morning with a professional colleague who is interested in boards and everything. And they had sort of heard me say this before. And they said, can you go over that again? And they were mesmerized. So what I'll do real briefly is just go all of them. Whether you're going to be an astronaut or a zoologist, and I start with interpersonal skills. And most people think, Walt, you and I are both gregarious, we're outgoing, and people think that interpersonal skills is just that you're an extrovert. No, interpersonal skill is about your ability to relate to people. And you're able to relate to people by being a continuous learner. So you must be able to relate. So have that ability to move into an organization. Using the military, you got to be able to talk to the private and the general. And you do that by being a lifelong learner. You go into the corporate situation, and Walt, you may see me do it. When I go in, I always go over and talk to the wait staff. And the reason, that was my mother. And I ask them if they have families. I ask them these things because I hope somebody did that for my mother, because her getting a lift, that was important when she came home. So that interpersonal skill, so become a continuous learner so that you can relate to everyone. The ability to communicate is critically important. And communication, I think of with 4 great subsets. When you get up and speak, time you open your mouth, someone thinks something of you. You write, you leave that forever. You must learn to listen. And my mom, I learned this from her: 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that proportion. And to this day, that's something that I continuously try to, it's probably one of my weaknesses that I've had over the years, because we all got something to say. And on that point, well, I tell people to take but out of their vocabulary. If I say, I agree with Walt, but time I say but, you're not listening to me anymore. You're thinking of what your counter is going to be. Why is he not agreeing with me? So if you can just say, I agree with Walt and then make your point, people will receive it better. And then the 4th part of that communication is body language. You can be welcoming, a smile, face. So think of those things. Analytical skills are critically important. And we think of those, West Point, engineering, right? So you got the quantitative part of those analytical skills. And Walt, as you know, as you and I have gone on in our careers, the most important becomes what? The qualitative analytical skills. Okay. This is shorter than this. Okay. And how do you develop those skills? And then next is leadership. And it's simple. I define it simply as the ability to influence a group to accomplish a common goal. And all of us should work on our leadership skills. And Walt, I'm chair of a public company board, Fluence, and they wanted me to be on the board, and I couldn't do it because of my wife's situation. After she passed, they asked me. I said, okay, I'll do it. And I went in and they said, we want you to be chairman of the board. I said, this company is in the battery energy storage space. Yes, I've had engineering background, but I'm not an expert on that. And the response was, we're not looking for you for that expertise. We have plenty of experts on the board that understand that. We want you for your leadership. And that was such a powerful message, is that you don't have to be the expert to be a leader. And everybody should strive to get feedback on their leadership skills, because that ability to influence is so important. Yeah. And then the next one is risk-taking or entrepreneurship. And, I've started a couple of companies. I had a very unusual career. I started a company with Fannie Mae, with SunTrust and Goldman Sachs, and sold it. And if you go out and do what everybody does, you're going to get the results that everybody gets. But if you're willing to take a risk, and it's like, well, it's not just about taking a risk. It's about what are the mitigating factors to it. I've jumped out of an airplane. However, I had a parachute and I had a reserve parachute. So don't think of just doing what everybody does. However, as you take the risk and go on the right edge of that curve, know what the mitigating factors are so that you can limit any downside. And last but not least is passion. Just having passion for what you do. I think passion puts a bow around the other five, and it makes people want to listen to you, want to be around you, want to follow you, want to take risks with you. And that those are just important qualities that I've tried to emulate in my own life.
Herman, something hit me whenever you were talking about all these things. And I don't know if I'd put it under interpersonal skills or communication or leadership, but 2 weeks ago, you sent me a handwritten note to thank me for asking you to join me on this show. And also thank me for something else that we were working on. And what a classy thing to do. Herman, you not only talk the talk, but you walk the walk. You really do. And, as you articulate these 6 things, I see you take them into a boardroom, and I see them, just you emulate them in all you do. And my hat's off to you for that.
Well, one of the things when I give speeches, and I'm giving quite a few now, and I ask the audience to think of someone that was critically important to them in their life, whether it's a coach, their parent, whomever it is, and write them a handwritten note. It's an art that's going away because life is about differentiation, right? Okay. And I tell them that note, when they get that note, you may feel good about it. They're going to feel 10 times better about it. Okay. Because they're going to sit there and say, oh my gosh, this person remembered me, and they feel good. And that note, and even from my days when I did big time marketing, if I had a client, his son played soccer, and I saw a soccer article, I'd take my little JLO card, do it. Hey, Walt, thought you might enjoy this article. So you're one of the things that we talked about is the difference between networking and connecting, right? Mm-hmm. We want to talk about that?
Yeah.
And the way I look at that and all of those things of remembering people, that's about connecting. Networking is great. However, at its base, it's transactional.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to do this for you and you do this for me. Nothing whatsoever wrong with it, but the basis of it is a transaction. I go by what I call connecting. How do you think in 1972, 73, I was elected as president of the student council at a school that was 16% Black? Because I connected. And let me tell you what connecting is. Connecting is when you do something for or with someone without regard as to what you're going to get in return. And to do that effectively, you've got to be authentic, and you've got to be consistent. If I know which acorn is going to grow, I'm only going to put those out. But we don't know which acorn is going to grow. And you got to do it because you authentically want to do it. And when you do that, you establish a relationship. You connect. And connections are a lot different. A lot of people have a lot of names in these things. Okay? Just names, contacts. Okay? I have a lot of relationships in mind. And I cannot tell you from a social perspective, from a business perspective, whatever, doing those things, it differentiates you in a positive sense, and it leads to more success. I mean, it seems simple to me.
It's simple, but not everybody does it. And I love something you just said. Life is about differentiation. I think that is so true. And how you differentiate yourself matters.
And not at the expense of others, right?
No.
Right.
But sometimes doing the simplest of things, like it used to be many years ago, we all wrote thank you notes. Now nobody writes them.
I tell you, that's something that my kids that's something that my wife and I taught them, and they do it. And I'll hope that they'll listen to this and they'll get an idea of your reaction to it. Was the only thing to do. I mean, there was no option of what to do.
Right.
And, I could have sent you an email, but the email wouldn't have had the same impact. Be honest.
Oh, that's right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well, Herman, I'm gonna wrap this up. I ask all of my guests this, but I'm always interested in. Everybody has a different response. But I like to end all my interviews by asking about gratitude. What are you most grateful for, Herman?
Well, I wish I could say one thing, but I can say them in some sense of priority. And I'm going to start with my family and my faith. Okay.
Hmm.
Because if you think of all the crazy stuff we do, and Walt, you and I have obtained success to some degree. And I tell my kids, my job is not to make you rich, right? Because we want to perpetuate this. And the only way we perpetuate it is each person has to continue to gain the skills and attributes necessary to be successful. So the family, I'm a very spiritual person. I pray every day. Um, I don't know if I call myself religious or spiritual, but I do believe in a greater being. And the whole idea of the golden rule is important to me. So that's what it is. Uh, Mentorship and relations. I'm a people person. I get energy from being around people. And I'm just thankful that I have a saying as well, Walt, that if you want to fly, you hang with the eagles. If you hang with dogs, you get fleas. So what that means, you become the combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that's important for young people to definitely understand. And that is critical there. And then the career opportunities I've had from, getting the opportunity to go to West Point, Stuart Scott, and being recruited to go to JLL. And, I built a new business at JLL, our public institutions building. So, reputational risk to get that done. But all of these opportunities I've had, and as I told you from the football story, I haven't always been successful. However, just the opportunities that have come before me. Service is so important to me. Okay. And obviously I have not served in combat, but I did everything to prepare for it. Jonathan and Herman was actually in battle. Jonathan was in the war zone before he left. So it's part of our family. My wife was in the Army. And I think even now, in terms of the service, I spent 10 years on the board of the military bowl. I'm one of the governors of the American Red Cross now, which is a major billion-dollar organization. And I'm also vice chair of the board at West Point, giving back again, where last week I was with President Obama, for example. We awarded him what we call our Thayer Award, which is an award we give to an individual that's not a graduate of West Point, that espouses the values of our motto, duty, honor, country. So as I'm sitting there in the receiving line with security, he couldn't be around a lot of people. I'm just sitting there going, I'm just a little country boy from Alabama. And here I am.
Right.
I'm on the Defense Policy Board, for example, that advises Secretary of Defense. And before they died, Madeleine Albright and Henry Kissinger, I'm in the room sitting next to them doing things. And grateful. But that all came from giving back, not from absorbing. And then if you think of the last thing, and particularly with my wife's untimely death from cancer, I'm so grateful for my health, okay, and longevity, and having the opportunity to be here with you today and see my grandson yesterday and my kids, and the thought of the future of doing great things for them. So I've got a lot of things to be grateful for.
Wow, Herman. Well, let me just say this. I'm grateful for you joining me today on this episode. Man, I'll tell you, there's been a lot of good quotes. I could just tell you that, which means a lot of.
Well, if many of your listeners don't know, Walt is a prolific author. So I will be charmed if some of this ends up in his next book.
Oh, well, it's definitely going to end up in a lot of blogs. Let's put it that way. I don't know if I'll write another book, but I just want you to know I'm really grateful to you for being on. And so I just like to thank you so much, Herman, for being on today. And I'd also like to thank everybody who tuned in. You can find more insights from our guests through the Off the Rak Plus newsletter, and we've got episode highlights and transcripts and helpful takeaways, all that stuff. By the way, next month we're going to have a 33-year Procter & Gamble executive, Tom Muccio. He's going to join us. He was the head of all of the teams, and in particular the Walmart team at P&G. And he's recently released a book called Collaborative Disruption, It's a book about being positive, and especially in a large organization when you're met with fierce resistance. So I'd just like to say, Herman, thank you again. And until we meet next month, I encourage all of you to be human with one another and really to find a way to have a positive influence on somebody around you each and every day. Thanks, everyone. And thank you again, Herman.
Thank you.